take a seat. If you come and you take a seat, we are going to start Congregants Hour in just a moment. And I just want to say, apropos, and it actually really wasn't something I was thinking about in writing the sermon, but apropos of this morning's sermon, Congregants Hour is something that really defines Temple Isaiah. It's something that began many years ago, first under Rabbi Stephen Fuchs and continued with Rabbi Panoff, and I am grateful for many reasons for Congregants Hour. As best as I understand it, and when Rabbi Steve and Vicki Fuchs are here with us in May, by the way, if you didn't notice that in the program guide, in May they're going to be spending Shabbat with us as a wonderful treat for all. Thank you for your enthusiasm, Rabbi Weiss. Rabbi Weiss was standing there when we arranged the date, so we'll have to ask Rabbi Fuchs whether this is correct. But I have heard it said many times that Congregants Hour at Temple Isaiah was really an invention out of nothing, that it was something that had not been done in other places. Now, because I talk to lots and lots of rabbis on Facebook, know that there are actually many congregations now that do something like this on the afternoon of Yom Kippur, that have their congregations come together to hear some personal stories. But it fills me with joy, and being able to take a look at the back of the program for Congregants Hour and to see all of the individuals who've shared their stories over the years. This year we actually did something that really we only did for the very first time now, which was to notate those whose memories are a blessing, those who are zichronam livracha, who've passed away in the years since they shared of their hearts in Congregants Hour. And it was a sad task to take a look back through that list and to see individuals who live no more, but whose stories are captured because they were shared with this congregation on this holy day. It was also a blessing to be able to look and see how few of them there were. And that's actually sort of both sides of the coin. It is always one of the things I look forward to, is to be able to sit with Marion Miller and to talk about individuals who would share their stories, who might share their stories with the congregation on Congregants Hour, and then to go forward and make calls. And 3 answered yes, indeed. And I am looking forward to hearing from each of them, but I'm going to turn it over to Marion first.
Good afternoon, friends. Is this on? Okay. They want you to make sure. Welcome to the 44th Annual Congregants Hour. It's my pleasure to greet all of you today, and I wonder if everyone who has been a speaker in the past 44 years would please stand up so we can see who you are. Okay, very nice. Well, thank you all. And our original 2 speakers are also here today, as they have been, I think, all the time. Hal Engel and Clyde Pinsker are here today, and they were here 44 years ago as well as our speakers. The mic isn't. Is this better? I have to be the guinea pig so that it's fine for them. Okay? Okay. We have 3 speakers today, and let me tell you a little bit about them. First is Jessica Cade, who was our most recent member, but has been a member for a number of years. She was born in Hawaii and raised outside of Philadelphia. She went to Johns Hopkins. After when she started working, she worked in the biotech industry, and then she's been working very hard raising 5 children. I don't know too many people with 5 children. I am impressed. And a very devoted mother. Her oldest is 27, her youngest is 12. She and her husband have been members of Temple Isaiah for 9 years. And Jessica has had a number of positions in the temple, a number of responsibilities, and most currently, she is the executive vice president on our board. So any questions you have about the board, you can ask her. Our second speaker is Andy Nussbaum, and Jessica's topic is To Be Jewish Enough. Andy Nussbaum's topic is My Father's Class, Who Survived. Andy grew up in the Washington area. He attended Stanford and GW Law School. He and Sharon have been members of Temple Isaiah for 27 years. He's a member of Men's Club. He's involved with the group that talks to Israeli students weekly, that project, Israel Connection Project. He's been involved with the Federation. He and Sharon have been married 39 years, and they have 2 daughters, ages 34 and 33. And our third speaker is Rick Slavkin. His topic is Keeping the Faith. He was born in Pittsburgh and raised there. He attended Carnegie Mellon and then the University of Maryland, and has worked as an electrical engineer. He has been a Temple member for 41 years. He and his first wife had 2 children who were raised in Temple Isaiah, and one who is still a member of Temple Isaiah. Is that correct? Their daughter, I believe? Okay. And he is a member of Temple Isaiah, which is really nice to have that symmetry. We have many families that have that symmetry, which is so nice. And he is currently in a significant relationship with Beth Reiser, who has been a member of Temple Isaiah for 29 years. So we have people who are newer into Temple, long-time members, and I think that you're in for a treat today. So thank you for being here, and we'll start with Jessica.
Can you hear me? Is that good? Shana Tova and Shabbat Shalom. Okay, so what does it mean to be Jewish enough? It really isn't a good question. Maybe it shouldn't even be something considered, but we all know that just because it shouldn't be considered doesn't mean that sometimes it doesn't enter our thoughts. So a little background on me and my family. I spent most of my youth as a member of a family of 5. My dad, my mom, and my 2 sisters, identical twins. My parents met on a blind date. My dad went to Hopkins, which at the time was all men, and my mom went to Goucher, all women, not unusual. My dad is a proud and unwavering Jew. He grew up listening to the stories from my grandparents and their relatives who escaped Vienna, Austria. My grandmother had to put her little brother on the kinder transport, and my grandfather and his family were forced to scrub with lye the front steps of their family home. They knew they had to leave. The family fled through places like Shanghai and London and wound up all over the world. They were the lucky ones who didn't get taken out of their apartments and picked up off the streets. My dad's parents, my grandparents, were not very religious, but it was important to them to have their Jewish family survive and continue. I remember at Thanksgiving one year, when asked what he was grateful for, my grandfather said, while looking around at his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, "I don't believe in miracles, but if I did, this would be a miracle." My mom grew up Episcopalian. I would consider that side of my family very what we called waspy. My grandfather even wore corduroy pants with ducks on them. Yeah. I don't remember them ever going to church, but we did celebrate holidays with them. We would often make Christmas tree as children, Christmas tree decorations with my grandmother. Though we didn't know it as children, my grandfather, my mom's father, was not happy that she was getting serious with someone Jewish. But as a side note, he was a very loving grandfather. He even threatened to pull her out of college. My parents stayed together and got married in 1966. For my dad, it was absolutely imperative that my mom convert to Judaism. And luckily, my mom had no reservations about doing it. I grew up outside Philadelphia on the main line near my mom's parents and extended family. We, my 2 sisters and I, grew up going to Hebrew school and the JCC, where my mom also taught tennis. I was bat mitzvahed. I would have been confirmed, but after missing a few classes, our rabbi gave me a choice. between being confirmed or playing in the state basketball playoffs. Needless to say, no confirmation for me. We went to my dad's parents for Passover and my mom's parents for Christmas. We didn't have a Christmas tree, but my mom put a Chanukiah in the middle of the mantle with greens around it. She actually learned this from my dad's mother, whose own mother was a Catholic convert in Vienna and did the same. Kindergarten through 9th grade, I lived and went to school in Haverford Township, an area where most kids I met were from Irish Catholic blue-collar families. My neighborhood friends' parents were firefighters and teachers. I loved that they had large families with wall-to-wall carpeting, cable television, and often ate dinner on stands while watching TV. My sisters and I were not so lucky. My parents limited TV and insisted we read a section of the newspaper before reading the comics. I didn't know anyone Jewish in my neighborhood. At school, I remember doing a cheer before games that started with Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. I don't think I even realized what I was saying. When I said I was Jewish, they would say, well, you're really half Jewish. Then, before 10th grade, we moved to a new neighborhood a few miles away. I started at Lower Marion High School, where there were definitely more Jewish kids, but it was past the time where I was involved in things like B'nai Mitzvahs. And I didn't know anyone well enough to be invited over for a Shabbat dinner. Then in college, I can't begin to tell you how many times I was told, but you don't look Jewish. A couple times I even had to throw out a few Hebrew words for backup. This all goes to say that though I still grew up feeling confident in my Jewishness, I was not around much family or others that celebrated in Jewish ways on a regular basis. I would say I was not surrounded by a culture of Jewishness. Fast forward to getting married. I married for love, and that was Scott, a Catholic man I met while at Hopkins. Lucky for me, he is a man of faith and has given me a great gift by being supportive of raising our 5 children Jewish. I one time overheard someone asking him why he was okay with that. And he replied, "It is most important to me that my children have faith and believe in something bigger than themselves." I also think I owe that in part to his love and admiration of my dad's parents. Scott and I then ended up in Eastchester, New York, where Scott grew up. Not a very Jewish community, but it happens to be right next to Scarsdale, New York. So it wasn't hard to find a local synagogue. My 2 oldest were bat mitzvah there, and I spent some time active on a few different committees. But still, most of my friends were in Eastchester, and most were not Jewish. Then came 2015, and Scott and I decided New York was way too expensive, especially with 5 kids. Where to go? The Philadelphia area is nice, but would have been family political suicide to move away from my in-laws and end up near my side of the family. We knew Maryland from our Hopkins days and living in Silver Spring, Laurel, and Rockville for a few years after graduation. So Maryland, here we come. Things moved pretty quickly. I found a house, and we moved, but now I needed to find a synagogue. And so I looked for a Reformed congregation, and there's Temple Isaiah. We need to jump right in. My daughter Sydney, who was 3 at the time, needed a preschool, and my son Daniel was 12 and 1 year away from bar mitzvah. Can we join? Of course. Does it matter that my husband isn't Jewish? Absolutely not. Is there space in your preschool? Yes. My son Daniel is 12 and on his way to his bar mitzvah. Can you make that work? Yes. And on top of all that, we live 10 minutes away. Perfect. Amazing. And I hadn't even met Rabbi Axler yet. We have now been members of Temple Isaiah for over 9 years. And in exactly 2 weeks, my youngest child, Sydney, is having her bat mitzvah. And in these 9 years, really for the first time in my life, I have made many Jewish friends. Our family has been lucky to actively participate in Temple Isaiah life in so many different ways. Scott and I have even been to Israel on an amazing trip with Rabbi Axler, Pam, and other TI members who I now consider friends. But for me, over these years, with that sometimes has come doubts. It's often I don't know a Jewish or Yiddish term. I'm not familiar with a Jewish food. I don't keep kosher. My mom gave up Jesus easily, bacon, not so much. I can't look back on a childhood with Shabbat dinners. I'm still working on memorizing the Havdalah prayers. When told to set something up in the Moedon, I had to ask, what's the Moedon? And in case anyone doesn't know, it's that room right behind you with the glass walls. So now, for the past 4 years, I've had the honor and pleasure of serving on the Temple Isaiah board, and then last year, I have lunch with Gary Proman. Yeah. You all know. And I am asked to be executive vice president. But am I Jewish enough? The answer to that is why I love Temple Isaiah so much. Yes, of course I'm Jewish enough, because here there is no enough. You are Jewish, you are welcomed, you are celebrated, that's enough. Shabbat Shalom and Shana Tova.
Give me 1 minute. Oh, I don't know the password. It's a problem. There it is.
Friday should be enjoying the fact that it's still called Friday.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. This that you're looking at here is an article that appeared in a fairly popular German newspaper this past summer. The headline reads in English, "Jewish Children, My Class, Who Survived?" And I'll come back to that in a few moments. This past January, I received at my office an email with the subject line, "Questions about Paul Nussbaum." My father, Paul, was born in Munich, Germany in 1928, came to the U.S. in 1939, and died in 1997. So it struck me as somewhat odd that I was being asked in 2024 questions about my father who died 27 years before that. Reading the email gave me a bit of the chills. The sender, a young man named Derek Lesho, wrote, quote, "I'm a student at the Ludwig Maximilians University in Munich, Germany, and as part of a class we are researching the stories of the former students of the Jüdische Volksschule," he says in parentheses, Jewish school here in Munich, led by Karl Sussheim in the 1930s, based off of a class photo from the spring of 1937, on which it seems your father, Paul Nussbaum, appears. I then found you through your father's obituary in the Washington Post. End quote from the email. This photo from the German newspaper was the photograph that Derek was referring to, and my father is number 34 in that picture, in the second row. Here's the whole story. Christina Miltz is a historian at the Institute of Contemporary History in Munich, Germany. And she was writing a dissertation on the late Karl Sussheim, a very prominent German Jewish scholar. Christina happened to find this photograph lying loose among the documents in Dr. and Professor Sussheim's estate, and on the back, Sussheim had written the names of all the students by number, including his daughter, who's number 16 in this picture. By the way, the teacher in the back, I think number 1 in the back left, is Henry Kissinger's great-uncle Ferdinand. How about that? Christina published her book on Sussheim in 2022, but she says that the photo haunted her after that, and she asked herself what had become of all the children. In the fall of 2023, with another historian in Munich and 13 university students, she began her research. Together, they managed to trace the lives of the 48 children in the photo, some with more detail than others. Ironically, Derek, who sent me the email and who was the student assigned to research my father, is an American student who lives in Northern Virginia and attends school in Munich, and his father, grew up in Ellicott City. Very strange. Many years ago, I had conducted and had transcribed a tape-recorded interview with my father. So I sent a copy of the transcript to Munich along with some other documents and photographs that my brother and I found in my parents' house. My mother died almost 3 years ago, so sadly we weren't able to ask either of them for more information about all the items that we found, and I'm going to talk about that later too. One of the items that we found but never knew about was a journal that my father kept in German starting in September 1939 after he came to Baltimore until March 14, 1941 when his father died. It's not very long, but it was written in this flowing German script, so I wasn't able to make out the words, let alone translate it into English. We sent a copy of that document to Munich, and the researchers who were working on this project translated it and returned it to us. Now, in the very front of the journal is a photograph that with my father, who's on the left there, and 3 of his school friends, Martin Sandbank, Bertel Sandbank, and Eva Balin, who he identified by name. That's his handwriting above it. The first entry in his journal from September 28, 1939, in Baltimore, says that he received the journal from his friend Berta Sandbank while he was still in Munich, who, quote, "Unfortunately, due to these dark times, I haven't heard anything from, but deep down I still hope to see her again. Who knows?" Question mark with an end of quote. Later, he identifies Berta in his journal as his girlfriend, and he wonders if she, quote, "is in Palestine. Who knows?" He says. On New Year's Day, 1941, his journal notes, wrote to Bertel. Tragically and sadly, the researchers on this project had discovered that 11 of the students in that photograph were murdered in the Holocaust, including my father's 3 friends. 10 of those students were forced onto the first deportation train to leave Munich in November 1941. The train was diverted to Kaunas, Lithuania. The passengers were taken to Fort 9, where they were all shot on the spot, including Ferdinand Kissinger, who we talked about earlier. Berta, my father's friend here, was later deported and murdered in Poland. Sharon and I were in Europe for 2 weeks in September for another reason, and we had the amazing good fortune to go to Munich for a day to visit with Christina and Derek. Although Christina is not Jewish, she is very passionate about her project, and she hopes to write a book and do an exhibition in Munich in the next few years. Her office, these are 2 different walls that come together, are like a scene from a movie or TV show where detectives are trying to piece together a great mystery and are looking at all these different photographs. So she has photographs of not all, but many of the 48 kids who they're researching. These were the pictures that we sent of my father and his brother and his mother, and his father too. Students ended up, according to the researchers, all over the world, including here in the U.S. and in Israel. Remarkably, 2 of the students from the picture are still alive in their late 90s, one living in Tel Aviv and the other in Seattle. One of the women wrote the words that are in the newspaper that I showed you at the beginning, where she said, "My class, who survived?" One of the students emigrated to Palestine with his parents and later became the Israeli ambassador to Liberia. 5 escaped to England on kinder transports, 15 came to the U.S., 7 to Israel, and others to Brazil, Uruguay, Argentina, and Australia. While we were in Munich, they took us to see the apartment building where my father, his older brother, and his parents lived until they left Europe in the spring of 1939. It's now an office building, but we were able to go to up to the floor where the apartment was, and I could sort of envision the history that was all around us when we went up there. Christina's the one in the middle, Derek is the one in the end, and I'll talk about the man in the green sweater in a minute. After Kristallnacht in November of 1938, my grandfather was taken to Dachau, where he remained in prison for several weeks. He was released in December. He was released because he was a World War II veteran, and the family at that time concluded they needed to leave Germany. As some of you may know, the problem for German Jews at that time was not leaving Germany, it was trying to find someplace that would let them in. My father and his family were studying Spanish for a while because they thought they'd be moving to Uruguay. They were also considering Shanghai, which was open at that time. Fortunately, a cousin of theirs had obtained a golden ticket from a U.S. consulate to get here, so they were able to enter into the United States. When my father's family left Germany in the spring of 1939, his father insisted on going first to Italy to say goodbye to other members of his family before leaving Europe altogether. They were then to go to Switzerland, fly to England, and then by ship to America. Apparently, they were caught in a catch-22 situation between the British and the Americans, who would each issue visas only after the other one did. In the transcript with my father I talked about earlier, my father mentioned that after the Jewish school was closed after Kristallnacht, he was tutored at home by a non-Jewish family friend named Maria Schwingenstein. The tutor's family apparently knew the Cardinal of Munich at the time, Michael von Faulhaber, who, according to my father, interceded and somehow was able to get the visa situation straightened out. Unfortunately, I'm not sure of any of the details, but I do believe that without that assistance, they would not have gotten out of Europe. When we met Christina in Munich last month, she did an amazing thing for us. The man here in the green sweater and here behind Sharon and me at lunch is the grandson of that woman, Maria. And here's the picture that he showed us of her. He knew that she was an activist and knew that she had helped Jewish families, but he didn't know anything about what she did for my father's family. Being in Munich and talking with all three of these people was an absolutely amazing, remarkable experience. I mentioned earlier about items found in my parents' house, and I want to get back to that. After cleaning up my parents' house, one of the great regrets in my life was not talking with both of them about all the stuff that they had accumulated from their past. In addition to the journal I talked about, we found dozens and dozens of photographs with people that I can no longer identify and other fascinating documents, mostly from my father's days in Germany, but some from my mother's side. And these two German war medals. One, I think, was for my father, who served in the German army during World War I, and the other, I think, went to my grandmother, who did something to assist the army outside of the military, but I'm not sure. I think that's what it is. In doing some Googling for this talk, and those of you who know me well know that I Google everything, I came upon an article from a March 2023 a website in reformjudaism.org, and I want to credit the author, Rabbi Maya Glasser, whom I don't know. But the article is titled, quote, "The Importance of Storytelling." And it starts by noting that, quote, "Jewish people love to share stories, as memory is a central Jewish value. We cannot forget what has happened to us because we must share it with future generations. The past is one of our best learning tools," end quote. She notes that we continue to remember and share difficult parts of our people's story because the difficult parts are also part of our history, and we should not only discuss happy memories or what brings us pride, but also the challenging parts that we'd prefer to shy away from. She concludes in her article that we are a storytelling people, and in every generation we strive to share our tradition and heritage, even the uncomfortable parts. Here's what I want to leave with everyone today. If you have grandchildren or grandchildren and you haven't done so already, please make sure you go over all your family stuff with them while you still can and share all of your family stories. They may not appreciate it now, but they will in the future. Go over everything. Show them your pictures. Identify the people. Explain the circumstances. Talk about all the family memorabilia. Write stuff down. And if your parents or grandparents are still around, make sure you find time to sit down with them and get the stories that they have that they will share with you. Waiting will only bring questions and possibly regrets later. I hope that this talk will be an inspiration of sorts to each of you to engage in storytelling with your families. Thank you. Shabbat Shalom, Shana Tova, and happy anniversary, Sharon.
Can you hear me okay? On the tie? Okay. How's that? Good? Oh, wait a minute. Old school. So nice to see a lot of familiar faces, but a lot of people that I don't know, and hopefully after the next 15 minutes or so, you'll know me a little bit better than you already do. Okay, I was born 74 years ago. I know, hard to believe. But the third of three boys. I grew up in a very traditional, conservative Jewish household in Pittsburgh. We kept kosher. We went to synagogue on the holidays, occasionally at other times, but we were not big synagogue goers. The one thing that was great about my youth was my father's father was one of 11 children, and many of them settled in Pittsburgh. So my father must have had 40 or 50 first cousins in the area. And so whenever there was a bar mitzvah, a wedding, you met a lot of extended family, which isn't necessarily true today. But it was a great childhood. I didn't have a lot of money, but there was a large Jewish community and a lot of Jewish friends, and I went to tons of bar and bat mitzvahs, so it was great. I was very active in B'nai B'rith. I was in AZA during high school, and one of the great things that came out of that was that I met my wife. She was in BBG, and we lived, according to my parents, at opposite ends of the world. She lived in Monroeville. For any of you who know the Pittsburgh area, it was about 12 miles from my house, and my parents always said, "Can't you date someone who lives closer?" But we were married in 1971 in my conservative big synagogue in Pittsburgh, but her rabbi from Temple David in the suburbs also officiated. And Temple David, up until a few years ago, reminded me a lot of Temple Isaiah. A couple hundred families, nice suburban, but now we are much bigger. Not to say that that's a bad thing, but Temple David was kind of that intimate, like Temple Isaiah that you had back in the day when there were only a few hundred families. We got married in 1971. We moved to Maryland after college. I got a job at Westinghouse. And then we found, too, that Columbia was really the place that we wanted to settle and raise a family. Our kids were born in 76 and 79, and we decided in 1983, it's time to join a temple and really introduce both Jason and Amanda to Jewish life and temple life. We discovered TI was a perfect fit. The rabbi at the time, Steve Fuchs, was just about our age, and he had 2 kids also, 7 and 4. Said, yep, this sounds like the right place to be. We liked the meeting house. We liked the interfaith concept. You heard about that some this morning with the rabbi's sermon. And life was good. Our initial plan was to provide our kids with a solid Jewish education and foundation. But Barbara and I soon discovered that we really liked belonging to the community, belonging to this Jewish community, and having lots of Jewish friends, and enjoying some of the activities in the temple as well. In 1989, I joined the adult choir. So 35 years later, other than Ann Goldshire, I have the second longest tenure in Shir Isaiah, and I love it. And when the rabbi first came to Temple Isaiah, I met with him as part of the outreach where various congregants would meet the rabbi at one of the congregants' homes, and he asked me, "What do you like most about Temple Isaiah?" And I said, "I love being in the choir." And I still do today. It's a great experience. Of course, as so often happens, my kids grew up. They do that. They had their B'nai Mitzvah, Bar and Bat Mitzvah. Everything was good, and they started lives of their own. So they moved out, and Barbara and I were kind of at that midlife crossroads. You're almost 50 years old. What are you going to do with the rest of your life? You're empty nesters. And where did Temple Isaiah fit in? Well, we were really strongly supportive of the meeting house, the interfaith center concept, and a little skeptical about moving into our own building. There's a lot involved. The dues go up. There's a lot to do when it's your building. And that loss, as the rabbi mentioned, of that melting pot or chili bowl or garden salad or whatever it was. It's nice to have that kind of extended community in an interfaith center. But we also realized that there were a lot of shortcomings of being in the interfaith center. The space, as our congregation is growing, you don't always have the space that you need. You don't always have the facilities that you need because you're sharing it with so many other congregations. So we were on board, fully on board, said, this is really the place to be. And looking back and looking at this beautiful building, this is definitely the right place to be for Temple Isaiah. And it's been great to be here for the 20 years. So as our congregation grew, so did my involvement in temple life. I'm sure many of you have been aware of some of my volunteer activities. I found just about every diverse way of volunteering, not only in Temple Isaiah, but with the Federation as well. Over the years, I planted many of the trees that you see around in the garden. We did that a couple of different Sunday afternoons. I made food at Atman's a couple of times at Ravens games. I volunteered for the cold weather shelter, stayed overnight in this building like 4 times, hated it every time, but kept coming back. I also helped out many, many times with the matzo ball run. And just about every year for the last, 8 or 10, I've helped with delivering the food after Yom Kippur to Elizabeth House, and I will do it again this Monday. Barbara was not quite as active in Temple Isaiah as I was, but shopping was one of her joys. And anybody who knew Barbara, she was not only an avid shopper, but she loved to spend money. So when Robin Golds here, decided like 12 or 13 years ago that Temple Isaiah needed a gift shop, she started Isaiah's Gifts, and Barbara was all in. Where do I sign up? It was not only getting involved with the sales and the Judaica, but she loved going shopping. And she and Robin went on some of these shopping trips. They went to these shows, and they found lots of beautiful things for the gift shop. And it turns out my wife was very talented at decorating too. And she helped with the display windows and really lent her talents to making the display windows something special for the gift shop. And because of that, there's a plaque outside on the left-hand side of the display windows. If you haven't seen it before, it's a plaque in her memory and the fact that she was so good at that. We went on the rabbi's trip in 2016 to Israel, and Barbara got to be designated as the official shopper for Isaiah's Gifts. Robin gave her a credit card, and she didn't hold back. So she bought many, many things during that trip, and some of it's still in the shop, unfortunately. So, yes. I retired from my longtime engineering job in 2014 and found that I had a lot more time to do the things that I really like to do. And part of that was volunteering. So I stepped up my volunteering. Many of you know Cheryl Kaufman, who started an organization called Kugel Connection, which kept growing and growing, helping people less fortunate, people in the Jewish community in Howard County. And eventually, Kugel Connection merged with Fed Tov, and it's part of the arm of the Federation. And because of those two organizations, I've had the opportunity to do many things volunteer-wise within the temple and also the Jewish community as a whole. I have been a fixture with our Day Resource Center once a month, and this is a plug, by the way. The second Wednesday of every month, a group of us serve a meal at the Grassroots Day Resource Center. It's Jessup or Elkridge. It's sort of on the border. And we've been doing this, I've been doing it for over 10 years. Some of the others for even longer. And every month there's a sign-up genius. So, you know, if you please like to help out, we need food for the people at the shelter. So there is a sign-up genius, and you can make food, deliver it to the temple, and we'll take care of the rest. I also developed some long-term relationships with shut-ins, people who couldn't get out. I went and visited, or I did shopping for them, or I took walks with them, and I found that to be very rewarding as well. A long-time congregant's mother, who passed away just about a year ago. I think, in fact, she had her 1-year yahrzeit just a couple of days ago. I got to know her very well because for about 5 years, I took her twice a month to her mahjong game at the library. So for those of you who know Lisa Solomon and remember her mom, Roz Rubin, that was a great experience for me just to be part of Roz's life. In retirement, I'd say everything was pretty ideal. I became a grampy. I have 3 wonderful grandchildren, and I have lots of time to spend with my grandchildren, with the rest of my family, and also to travel. Many of you know that I'm an avid traveler. I love going as many places as I possibly can. Besides the Israel trip, I've been to Europe a dozen or more times. I took 2 extended trips since my retirement that I never could have taken while I was working because they were 6 weeks long. One to South America and the other one to Australia, New Zealand, and the South Pacific. I've been to almost every U.S. state, and it is on my bucket list to get those last couple of states and finish. And I've been on lots of cruises. I'm sure many of you know that I'm an avid cruiser. Plus, during those early retirement years, with all my volunteering, I was honored to be named 2019 TI Volunteer of the Year. And I'm especially honored because it was the year after Ellen was honored as Volunteer of the Year. So to be in that same company is especially an honor. I've always been an optimist, and I'm going to borrow a little bit from Rabbi Axler's Rosh Hashanah sermon. I truly believe that not only is the glass half full, but I also keep adding to it at every opportunity. So just when everything seemed perfect in my life, it suddenly wasn't. In November of 2019, Barbara was diagnosed with cancer. She fought valiantly for over a year, but she died 6 months short of our 50th anniversary. Our last 8 months together were very difficult, but were also special for the two of us, as we were in near total isolation because of COVID. The care committee certainly helped with things like meals and came and visited occasionally from a distance, But we were mostly in isolation, and the only other opportunity we had to interact with other people was either going to the hospital or to chemotherapy. We did manage one more family trip to our treasured beach house in Bethany, but on November 22nd, 2020, I lost my wife after 54 years of being a couple. To say it was difficult is a great understatement. My family and friends were great comfort during those next months, but my faith was definitely tested. I wondered, and I discussed with Rabbi Axler, why do bad things happen to good people? Barbara, as a wife, a mother, a Grammy, a friend, and a pediatric nurse for nearly 50 years, had given so much to so many for her 71 years on this earth. And she had so much to live for. I had lots of questions, but I didn't have answers. So after months of introspection and surrounded by immediate family, as we started to emerge from the pandemic, and with the help of a great grief counseling group that was sponsored by the Federation, I realized I still had so much to live for. I was certainly grateful for those 54 years that I knew my wife, and I cherished all the memories of the time we had together. I knew I could continue to enjoy my life. There were so many friends, so much family, and so much I could give back to the community. So I continued to do that. And 4 years later, I'm still heavily invested in volunteering. This is my second term on the Board of Trustees. The last term, I was your financial vice president, so don't blame me for increases in the commitment. And I've also become, for the last 3 years, assistant manager of Isaiah's Gifts. Go figure. I guess you could say that I'm all in as well as Barbara. But I also found that life is more than just family, more than just community, and more than just volunteering. Shortly after Barbara died, a friend from the congregation, I tend to get a little emotional. Many of you know her, Beth Reiser, reached out to me. I had known Beth casually for over 10 years, but she is also a very good friend of Barbara's and became even friendlier with Barbara after Beth's husband, Monty, died suddenly in 2015. A couple years later, Barbara and Beth sat next to each other on a bus trip up to see a Broadway show. It was Waitress, by the way. And so they had 8 hours, round trip hours, to get to know each other better. They found that in addition to many mutual friends, they also had a lot in common. Little did they know. So when Beth first called, she told me that she understood what I was feeling and was there if I wanted to talk. And we did talk and talk for several months. We both liked to take long walks around Columbia's lakes, and we shared an occasional meal, although we didn't actually start dating until the end of 2021. However, none of our mutual friends was at all surprised when we did become a couple. 2022 was a great and uplifting year. Beth had wanted to sell her house since before the pandemic, and I asked her to move into my house that I had for over 40 years. We also did some traveling. I showed her around my hometown of Pittsburgh, and she met much of my extended family, including many of Barbara's relatives. We took a long road trip to New England, and we shared a West Coast trip to visit our kids. Beth has a daughter in San Francisco. I have a son in Los Angeles. Everything was great again, until it wasn't. Beth had heart issues for nearly 20 years after her own bout of cancer and chemotherapy had damaged her heart in the early 2000s. With the help of a compassionate and caring cardiologist, she managed a very normal life for that whole time. But things changed in late December of 2022. What should have been a very routine procedure at Howard County General resulted in cardiac shock, and after a week at the cardiac care units of the University of Maryland and then Johns Hopkins, we received the life-altering news. Her weakened heart would not recover and needed continuous medical intervention. She was placed on the transplant list the first week of January. It took 7 weeks of waiting to find a new heart, 6 more weeks of recovery in the hospital before Beth was able to come home. Although the recovery was just beginning, the last 21 months have been challenging. Lots of ups and downs, but the future is really looking bright. Beth traveled on a plane for the first time this past April. It had been 18 months, and we went to visit her family in Chicago for Passover. And we've also had recent wonderful trips to Alaska, to California, and to Las Vegas. The latter, Las Vegas, was a first for Beth, and she didn't lose too much money. And the best news of all, we just moved into our own home together in Ellicott City, and we're very close to my daughter and her family, and it's really a new beginning for both of us. You never know what life might throw at you, but at every turn, it's important to be positive. Count your blessings and keep the faith. I'm definitely continuing to add to my half-full glass, and I've taken the rabbi's words to heart, and I'm finding ways to be 10% Jewier. Lashana Yoter Tova, which I learned means to a better year ahead, which seems much more appropriate during these difficult times. But let's all keep the faith.
It never ever fails that our speakers for Congregants Hour share from their lives in a way that models what vulnerability can do in the very best of ways. And I thank all three of you, each of you friends and each of you cherished parts of this congregation. If it's okay, we have time for a couple of questions perhaps, or a couple of feedback notes that could be for one or all three of our folks. And I will bring a microphone to whoever shoots their hand up in the air quickest. Or, see, you made it easy for me.
Jessica, I wanted to let you know that what you said really moved me and was exactly what I needed to hear today. If there's some time we could talk, that would be great. But thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I'm sure my husband, if he had heard what you said, would have thanked you as well. So thank you so very much.
And the great part is you don't have to be in the sanctuary to hear this, because all of our videos of the High Holidays will be on the Temple Isaiah blog part of our website, including each individual one of our Congregants Hour speakers. So you can click on each one or the whole thing. Any questions or comments? All right, coming to some.
I'd like to know how your children dealt with the new life that each of his and her parents created?
That's for Rick.
That's for Rick.
My daughter's in the back. So I will say that she was extremely close to her mother. It's not unusual that it's difficult, especially when the surviving parent finds another relationship. But she's been great, and my son out in California have been great. They both want what's best for me, and they realize that Beth and I have a special relationship now, and it's good for both of us. So.
Hi, Jessica. I grew up in Scarsdale. Did you go to Westchester Reformed Temple?
No, that's a good question. No, actually, Scarsdale Synagogue. Scarsdale Synagogue, Temples, Tremont, and Emmanuel. It was a long name. It was right off the Bronx River Parkway.
The other one.
The other one.
There's some things in your background that would have been different had your parents gone there. Modern days, what happens when a Catholic marries a Jew? They send their daughter to Quaker school. Sarah Leah Stolway Gross, and my late husband was Dutch, when you saw those tulips, went to Sandy Spring Friends School. You mentioned Haverford. I believe that's a Quaker college, and there was Quaker Ridge in Scarsdale, New York. Given that my parents grew up with varying degrees of prejudice, they first moved to Harrison, where the Catholics, the Jews, and the Protestants didn't agree on educational taxes, and the girls were too dressed up. They moved to Scarsdale because they had relatives there, and everybody wore normal kids' clothes, and the Catholics, the Jews, and the Protestants all got along very well. My second grade boyfriend was the son of an Episcopal priest. Jeff Kempsel's father, it ruined their lives because at a cotillion at the Scarsdale Golf Club, they wouldn't let in a converted guy, and Jeff's father stood up for him. Anyway, you would have, and one last thing, I'm the daughter of a civil engineer. Westchester Reformed Temple was a congregation that broke off from one in around Harrison, and it was in the shape of a six-pointed star. Why? Because Lord knows who, if they flew over it, they would see the six-pointed star. My dad said, no, this is a ridiculous design. There's no room for anything. All I can say, after many expansions, it kind of looks like this. I just haven't been there for a while. Thank you for listening.
All right, we got 2, 1, and 2 are going to be our finals because, 3 because there's a birthday. Wait. The two of you are sitting next to each other. The birthday girls, by the way, just so if you didn't know this, if your birthday falls on Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur, you get a full birth month. So both Ann Goldsher and Jackie Norton get a birth month. Go ahead. Birthday girl, then to Larry, then we're coming over here.
Thank you. I just wanted to say something to Andy. Andy, the last thing that you said really resonated with me because you talked about the fact that we need to reach out to our elderly family members and talk about their lives and learn everything we can while they're alive. And we need to share those things with our children as well. And every year I say, we need to do it. We need to do it. And my mom now is 94. We have not done it. So thank you for that. And I also wanted to thank Marion Miller and Rabbi Axler for choosing 3 absolutely outstanding speakers. You were all wonderful.
Just a comment. The 3 of you gave remarkable presentations. I was profoundly moved in different ways by all 3 of your unique, moving, profound experiences. So thanks to all of you, and also to Marion Miller and Rabbi Axler. Just one other comment. Rick, I know you probably best of all, and you didn't even really name half of the volunteer opportunities that you participate in. But one thing you're very smart for not doing is volunteering to become executive vice president.
All right, I think we had one more over here. Sharon.
You're all very good, but I wanted to give a special toda rabah to Andy for his message of storytelling. We've spoken a little bit about this, but my parents were both born in Germany. And my parents took the opposite approach and never talked about anything. I lost my dad 10 years ago and my mom 4 years ago during COVID. And I wish that they had told their stories instead of leaving me in the dark with those pictures and those items that I'll never know anything about. My dad came over to this country at the age of 13 by himself. He's an only child, was an only child and never saw his parents again and lost everything in Germany. My mom got out on the last boat at age 9, thank goodness. But it is so important to share those memories because you may not have another shot at it. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all three of you for sharing from your hearts and from your lives with your congregation on this most sacred of days. And I always say, the stories themselves are the sacred piece. So thank you one more time. We're going to hear it for all of our speakers. And we're going to continue on with our afternoon service, followed by Yizkor and Ne'ilah. Afternoon service is going to begin in 5 minutes. For those who are coming and sticking around for afternoon service, move forward. We like to see you. It's nice and intimate. A Shana Tova and Shabbat Shalom.